Welcome, everyone, to episode 445 of Just Joshing. I'm your host, Joshua Penteloresco. I write stuff in Podcast 2, and today is part 1 of my two-part conversation with Michael Oden. Mike and I had a great conversation about comic books. I mean, this is the epitome of comic book chat. I really enjoyed chatting with Mike, and I'm hoping if he's listening to this that if he wants to come into my actual show, I'd love to talk to him about putting him on. But all things considered, I had a blast with this conversation, and Mike has a great comic out right now. You should definitely check out and support. I did a nice review of it on my column at firstcomics.com. All in all, man, this was a lot of fun as a conversation, so let's just get into it, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
All right, so here's the thing, right? I interviewed lots of people, and apparently I'm intimidating. I don't know why I'm intimidating exactly, but sometimes people come onto this and they get really, really nervous. So when I do a sound check, like my favorite, I never ask this on the air, is say something funny, because it puts you kind of on the spot, right? Which is, on my personal level, it's hilarious. No matter what the response is, it's funny, right? Either you do exactly what I tell you to do, in which case, awesome, or you come up with something really original, or you fall on your face, and either way, we get it all out of the way off the air. So you're a lot more comfortable. Yeah. That's my master plan behind it. There is a method to the madness. It's also a really good icebreaker. So.
Yeah, I mean, I dig it.
Yeah. So.
I want you to know that I'm not at all intimidated by you. So.
I no, but I'm not, like, people get nervous when you do interviews sometimes.
I understand. It's always one of those things where I think that it's one of those things that, some artists and creators are better at handling the social side, the social side of this, where you go and talk to people, and others are very much like, no, I'd rather just be writing and getting involved into my world. That's where I go and escape, is to create these books or go make this art for this or that. And so, like, I've noticed that it's a pretty, like, even split. You've got some guys that are able to do really well on interviewing, on podcasts, and you have other people where it's just like, oh man, like, I feel like you need an anxiety puppy or something.
Well, it's interesting because we've hit the stage, like, this is where we're at today. We aren't just artists anymore. We're business people presenting our product. Yeah. That's what we are. And there's
100%.
Right. There's no. We all have to. Okay, so my favorite salesman of all time is Macho Man Randy Savage. I'm not kidding you. Like, the smile on his face, ladies and gentlemen, is awesome, right? But because the thing about, and actually I think it's one of the best lessons about self-belief you'll ever see, because think about this. His job was to talk people to come leave their house, the comfort of their own home, pay a ticket to watch him get beat up or beat up somebody, right? And all he had to say, right, which is hard to do. It's actually incredibly hard to do, right? And he did it for years, believing in this over-the-top, like, freak out kind of character. It's just like, you're just unbelievable. But he bought into it so well that you couldn't help but believe it. And that worked.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we all are, as you said, like, we are our own salespeople. At the end of the day, we have to develop, to a degree, a persona that is just as much about the books that we sell. Like, it's just as integral to that, because, like, you can work on every book under the sun, but if nobody remembers who you are, that's not going to be what draws them to your book.
Well, it goes a couple different ways. It goes a couple different ways on that one. It's no one's going to remember the book, but also ultimately, like, when you work with somebody, them being good at their work is huge. But you know what also is huge? It's you're a decent human being I can get along with. It's not. I mean, that's big. Because if you are so solitary, so confined that you don't interact, and if you don't interact well, you're gonna cost yourself jobs. Like, just because this is a world where we all have to connect on some level. I mean, you have to talk to people. Even in this bizarre, weird, whatever the hell you want to call this time, guess what I've been doing? Talking to people. Because that's how you grow contacts, you make business, and it's good business, but it's also just, it's good. If if people know who you are, it increases your chances of getting work.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, let's see. So, Mr. Michael, we should formally introduce ourselves since we've talked for about 5 minutes so far. That's right.
That sounds like a good idea. You're the hostess with the mostest, so let's
ladies and gentlemen, I am Joshua Pantelleresco. I write stuff, I podcast, and occasionally make audiobooks, and I narrate, and sometimes I'm good at it. I have a big mouth at the very least. And then, my buddy in crime for today is the one and only Michael Oden. I did it right.
You said it right. That's fine. Like, yeah. I'm never gonna be too picky about it. So, how's it going, guys? I'm Michael Oden. I am the creator writer of Elysium Fields. I also do industry freelance journalism for Upper Geek, and I co-host a few shows on YouTube and what have you as well. So
that explains why you're so at ease. Like you got a lot of practice at it too. That explains it. Just a smidge. Once or twice.
I'm on air most days.
Yeah. It's like once or twice. I do my thing. I'm good at it, and that's cool. So, all right, let's go from this point of view. Where did you start? Because obviously, you sound like you started in one thing, and that one thing led to a zillion other things, and you've just been doing those zillion other things. But I guess, what was your first love? Like, what was it that pushed you?
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, so when it comes down to getting into this, I mean, obviously, I grew up, I had 2 older brothers, and they got me into comics, and I was way more into comics than either of them were, but like it was a whole thing that I loved and everything like that. It had always been an obsession of mine. And then I was deployed in Qatar for about a year, and while I was over there, we had nothing to do except like just BS. And so I started going and writing pieces for a site called Movie Pilot. And so I started on there, and I got noticed. I had written this review of a Superman comic, and it got noticed by Movie Pilot. They posted it up on their website, and they put me in through their verified creator program. And then, Movie Pilot eventually got shut down. I worked for Heroic Hollywood for a little bit. That didn't really take well for me. Started on my own blogs, and it was around this point that, I was having people be like, "Hey, why aren't you making your own books?" Because like I would sit there and talk about like how I would handle these things differently, and everything like that. Because I've never been one to just be like, "Oh, this is what I don't like." I always present a way where it's like, this is what you could do to make this better. And that comes from that military side where, it's always about not just what happened wrong, but what you could do to improve those things.
Well, yeah, and that's a good actually quality to have. Like criticism, I think one of the hardest things about our field is, okay, this sucks. Okay, why does it suck? I don't know, right? Right. I found, and that's worthless because you don't know how you can fix it. But if someone can come and like go, okay, listen, I didn't feel anything here. You could add maybe a little thing here, a little thing there, and it might be better. That's a lot of way. It gives a direction where artists can go. You know what I mean? And that's huge.
But it is important, and I think that it's one of these things that a lot of creators have issues hearing. But constructive criticism is how we push forward as artists, and it's always a very difficult thing to be told what's wrong about your product, because for us as creatives, there is this whole element where it is this personal thing that we've invested this time in, and we want people to like it. But the fact of the matter is that even the best comics ever written have their flaws, And it's very important to realize that, you know, we have so much more that we can learn. And there should never be a point where we feel like we know everything about our craft, because we don't. There's always something that we can do to be better. And so constructive criticism is that tool that allows you to look at things. And, you know, I've been very fortunate, and Elysium Fields has gotten very positive response from people. But we have had criticisms. We have had people point out things that we could do better. And that's just as important as every single positive response that we've gotten.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I got a really interesting question for you. Would you want a perfect work?
I don't think that a perfect work exists. And there are stories that I have read that I love so much that I would give them 10 out of 10. So that's not me being like that pretentious person that's like, oh, there's no such thing as perfect. Because like at the end of the day, if somebody accomplishes what they set out to do with a story about a character that I enjoy or that somebody else enjoys, by doing that well, there's no way for us to be really objective about it. We love everything about it. So it's like something that is probably more like an 8.59 gets elevated to a 10 because it means that much to us. But I don't think that I would ever attain a perfect work. And I do think that if I did get something that I felt was that perfect to me, I don't know if I'd share it.
Yeah, because I've had as I've gotten older / wiser. We'll debate the wiser for like I just met you, so we'll debate that another day, another time. But I figured out something like perfection is a great ideal to go for. But I also realized that what makes our voices part of what makes the voice so unique is our flaws, right? It's not like the there's no, I mean, perfect work's impossible if you really want to like break it down. But I think the fact that our voice is so unique, I think, and everyone brings something so like uniformly them to the table. I think that's more important than a perfect work. I think a perfect work would be boring. I think the fact that no matter how good we get to, right? I think personally the 9.5 should be the goal. Like you don't need to fix every mistake, and you probably shouldn't, because it's your voice and who you are as a person that I think like we tell our stories in our stories, and those stories. Those are how we connect. It's not that it's a perfect story. It's that voice you add to it. So it's just kind of curious.
And I think that it's also one of those things where it is something that should always just be just out of reach. Because, you know, there are definitely a lot of creators, especially when you look at the mainline, that have had very successful careers and have put out some of the most iconic stories in the industry. But you look at how they write now, and you wonder if this is even the same person that wrote that book.
I can think of a few examples.
I can too. I just wasn't sure.
No. I can think of a few examples like that. I think this is the biggest thing as a creative, and this is something else I'm thinking about more and more as I get older and wiser. I think we always have to bring something unique to what we say. I think the trap we get into when we make our work a career is eventually we create expectations with our audiences, whoever they are. And there's a point to grow as an artist, you have to break out of your comfort zone somehow, some way. And the truth of the matter is, right, you're doing very well with your comic. Do you walk away from that to do something completely brand new? I mean, how easy would that be? Right?
And that's my whole thing, is that, like, I don't know, like for instance, you know, I have Elysium Fields, and that has been successful. I don't think I would ever just walk away from comics just because I've done a successful book.
No.
Like that. What I would do is like, okay, well, Elysium Fields is it's a tournament book. So it's like, okay, well, why don't I switch it up? Why don't I try a different genre?
Yeah.
Why don't I try this? Why don't I try my hand at that? And and try and push my range as a writer and as a creator as far as I can. And, I think that that's the important thing. And, I agree that we do have to bring something unique to the table each and every time that we put our pen down to write. And I think that is something that is lost on on some people when they get to a certain point where that's success.
I look at, okay, so let me give you one of my favorite writers of all time is Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury. But the stuff at the beginning of his career is better than the stuff at the end of his career. And the reason why, it's not because the stuff at the end of his career is bad. It's not. Like, technically, it might even be better than what he actually did earlier. But that voice in his earlier work was so him. Then now you could feel it when you read it. Like, this is who he is.
100%. It's the same thing that you see, like, Neil Gaiman had his interview here during DC Fandom when they were asking him about Sandman.
Yeah.
Right? And they were talking to him about, if he had any inkling of an idea of how big this thing was going to become or anything like that, how much of a success. It's like I'm gonna be completely honest with you. The reason why Sandman worked was because I was brand new to this genre and I had no idea how any of this worked. And I made a lot of mistakes. And if I'm going to be frank with you, if I knew how important this story was going to become to so many people and how influential it was going to be, I probably would have screwed it up.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's true. It's so true. That's my favorite era of comics, by the way. The late '80s, early '90s. For mainstream comics, that might be the best era of all time. I know say what you will about the '60s and '70s, but I just think of so many books from that era that were, including Sandman. But you had Watchmen come out during that era. I am a huge sucker for anything John Ostrander did during that time. Peter David's Hall. No, I actually do think John Ostrander was ahead of his time, like hugely ahead of his time.
There was some really solid stuff that came out in that late '80s, early '90s period, and there were a few moments within the past 10 years or so that I feel like comics came close to going back toward that.
Absolutely. I think for me right now, Image and Boom both make me very happy that they exist because
it's crazy that
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard about Boom, I was going into a comic book store to do my standard pickup, and the guy that worked there, who I chew his ear off with comics all the time with, he was like, "Have you read Black Market?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" And so he handed me this book, and it was the first book by Boom Studios that I ever read, and it was about these group of guys going around and kidnapping superheroes to harvest their organs to sell on the black market because they cured diseases.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is really interesting, and Boom has done very well for themselves for a small indie publisher.
Oh yeah. No, they.
Recently, and Image, I've always been a huge proponent of Image. I grew up with I had two older brothers that were in high school while I was in elementary school, and both of them were huge fans of Spawn, and so I've always been a big Image fan, and when they announced the Invincible animated series the other day, I literally screamed and ran around my house
that's actually that's actually my favorite Robert Kirkman book, honestly. Of all of them, that one's my favorite.
It makes me very mad that people have been talking about The Walking Dead for years. I'm like, read fucking Invincible.
No. Invincible is pure fun. I think it's Robert Kirkman at his absolute uncynical best, and I think that's why. And it's real. It's got some really cool issues. He's retelling the hero's journey in a very, very fun way. It works.
Well, the other thing that the big thing that I always tell people about with Invincible is, you look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it sets a standard for this is how you do a heel turn face.
Yeah.
Right? The redemption of Zuko is probably one of the best redemption arcs that I've seen in a lot of modern media.
Easily the best in a North American cartoon by a shot.
Yeah. So, and where Invincible comes in on that is the story of Rex Robot.
Yeah.
Is by far the best fall story that I have seen.
Yeah, no,
his fall from grace is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And his takeover of the Earth, I have all of those first prints, and I will cherish them forever.
Yeah, no.
They're so good.
For me, that book is Saga. Like, I love Saga. I wish
Saga's very good. Brian K. Vaughan is did a good job. I'm so behind, but I was one of those guys that had like every issue for the first.
Oh no! I have the whole run. I still I have the entire run. I even got Beyond. I used to live in Calgary.
Is it over?
What?
Is it over?
For now. The cliffhanger will make you mad. It'll make you very good. The cliffhanger will make
kill me. Okay.
Yeah. It also will break your heart.
I'm so behind.
No, it will break your heart, but it also make you mad at the same time because you knew it was coming. Like I knew. I'm not going to spoil anything because you haven't read it. You knew they were going to get to that point sooner or later.
There is a lot of foreshadowing for a bunch of messed up stuff to happen, in particular with the prince.
Yes.
But so
yeah.
I really enjoyed Brian K. Vaughan's saga. That was great. And Brian K. Vaughan also did Why the Last Man, which was phenomenal. Which
and he had two amazing creators. I lived in Calgary, like I said, so I met Fiona Staples at a convention when I was selling my books. So I have the first issue complete. It's personalized. I don't care. It's personally defaced by Fiona Staples. If I ever meet Brian K. Vaughan, I'm going to get him to deface that one too. I'll buy a new #1 down the road. I don't care. The fact of the matter is, like, it was such a cool. Right. See, so I grew up reading Green Lantern. I'm a huge Green Lantern junkie to the point that I watched the movie. Don't hate me. I feel like that was
I mean, it is what it is. Dude, I grew up. One of my favorite guilty pleasure movie is the 1994 Shadow with Alec Baldwin.
Oh.
I will never not love that film.
That movie.
I recognize that it is objectively a bad movie.
Yes.
That between Alec Baldwin having the perfect voice for the character and that bridge scene in the first 10 minutes, that scene still gets. It's so freaking good. It's one of my favorite entrances of a hero in any film.
Yeah, there are redeeming qualities to that movie. Even though you know it's not the best, it's harder for me to justify that with Green Lantern.
That's fair.
It's hard for me to justify that with Green Lantern.
I can't do anything for you on that.
No.
And hey, I mean, at least you have Green Lantern 4 coming. I'm hoping that's solid.
Oh well, actually, do you know what I'm secretly hoping? I want them to put Jon Stewart. I want them to do Jon Stewart as the main character.
They announced the lineup for the first season.
Oh really? Yeah.
Alan Scott, Guy Gardner, Jessica Cruz, Simon Baz, and then there will be appearances by Kilowog, Sinestro, and a few others.
Okay, so
what I'm thinking it's going to be is that it's going to be an anthology series, and that everything's going to be loosely tied together, but it's going to be each episode will be like a mini story for each of those Green Lanterns, and then the season 2 will incorporate more of them, and eventually you'll get something where they all come together. But I could be completely wrong.
Well, actually, see, here's what I hope they do, because if that's the cast they have, Baz and Cruz, like that comic, Green Lanterns is actually a really good comic. Especially when
I was never a huge fan of Baz.
No. I get it, but it works with Cruz. Like he works well in an ensemble. He does work by himself. I get you, but with Cruz.
And that's what I've heard. I heard that their comic that they had together was actually pretty solid.
Yeah.
I just remember when Simon Baz came out and I read like the first few issues of this, and it was just like, man, this feels like stereotype bingo.
Oh no. Okay, so this is So I have this is probably our last Green Lantern. This is my theory about Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run. You stop at Blackest Night. You stop at the end of that. You stop there. Because once he got there, he had nothing left to say. Like, nothing. And you could actually tell.
And you see, that's my whole, maybe from a Green Lantern standpoint, but like, Jeff Johns' Aquaman run during New 52 and everything going into like Throne of Atlantis was freaking brilliant.
No, absolutely. No, he but you can tell, like it's just like there's a point, I think there's a point where this is where I think we're going back to something we talked about earlier, where money meets the artistic whatever.
Yeah.
Right? You're caught because you have a hit and you need to go, but you also need to go away because you've said everything you're going to say about this character right here, right? You don't know where to go from here, but at the same time, they need you maybe to stick around for another year or so, to just until they get someone else ready to take over. So what do? You come up with the Simon Baz art. You come up with you do whatever you can do to keep yourself amused. And I honestly feel like that final Green Lantern run.
That's fair. I guess it's just it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if I were a Muslim dude, I'm not sure I'd be happy that this is who's repping me.
You know what? I totally get it. But I mean that I really like this is the thing, right? We get to the Green Lantern's book. And I can't. His name just completely went blank. And he did and I'm really mad at myself about this. Sam Humphries. His first two issues were, you could tell the first two issues he was struggling to find the voice of the characters. But by issue 3, he got it. And every issue after that got better. And he developed both Baz and Cruz into really, really interesting.
That was during Rebirth, right?
Yeah. Like
Rebirth was so good, and then they just threw it all away.
I know. No,
don't understand. It was like, hey, we have a wheel that's working really well. It's great. Let's throw a hatchet in it called Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah, well, it's again, it's that money. It's the money versus creativity issue, right? Bendis is a name. I actually think Bendis did okay on his Superman stuff. I think giving.
I don't.
Yeah.
As somebody who was adamantly reading the Tomasi run and.
Oh yeah, you're not. Okay. Okay. Tomasi. Okay. The Gleason Tomasi runs. Anything they've done has been great. I've actually. It's so good. It's telling, like when the Batman run Grant Morrison did with Nightwing and as Batman and Robin and Damian was actually topped by. I mean, it was like because that Morrison run's great, but the Gleason run's actually better. It's like
well, and then you had a beautiful pair. So you had these more human stories of Superman during the Superman stuff for Tomasi and Gleason and Jimenez, and then over on the Action Comics side, you brought back the freaking legend Dan Jurgens for all like that was your action book. That was your Superman doing cool stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so it was just like you had best of both worlds of Superman going, and so I was just like,
why'd you mess that up? Right?
It's like, why would you hand a man that has literally tanked your opposition for the past 5 or 6 years? Like his sales Bendis' sales over at Marvel from the books that he was doing have been dipping like crazy because it wasn't consistent. Even his best books over at Marvel by the end were like 6s, 7s out of 10s. My favorite book that he had going by the time he was leaving was Irredeemable Iron Man, but he in his exit ruined that book. So when you get to them, I'm not going to come to Bendis, but some of his books are stinkers. Some of them, they're like, I call it there's something about Mary syndrome. Some people think they're really good. Sometimes they put me to sleep. Like Young Justice is that book for me. It's like, I read it, it's like, no. It's like, that's me. It's one of those things that I remember reading. I read Bendis' Man of Steel story and it was literally it was the most pretentious thing, because it was a 5-issue mini story that the entire point of it was to justify why Superman was in trunks again. That's literally the only payoff you got from Man of Steel. And then I read like the first few issues of what I think the art was called Son of Krypton, where whatever that villain's name came back, and Rogarzal or whatever the heck it was, and it was just like, this is so annoying. And to have Superman, like, this dude destroys the bottled city of Kandor, and for Superman to be like, yeah, let's talk reasonably. It's like, no. Superman is the voice of reason, but there are lines.
No, I get.
Superman would not be looking to have civil discourse with the man that destroyed the final vestige of his race.
I actually think going back to Thomas Ian Gleason, they made Superman as a dad cool. That's actually, I think, the best thing I can honestly say about that run. Because all the DC characters that would be a dad and a good dad, it would be him. Like, it's not even close, right? Batman's interesting.
And like, that was the thing, was that Superman was a fantastic dad, but he also wasn't perfect. There were times where he'd be overprotective. There were times where he'd fail at being a parent. He wouldn't say the right thing, and John would go off and do something rebellious. And like, it was this situation where it's like, no one is, even being the best superhero in the world, is not necessarily going to be.
It humanized him. It humanized him in a way that he hadn't been human ever, in a good way, and it made him relatable in a way that I don't think any other hero could be. Like, everyone's like right? I mean, Batman, yeah, he's a dad, but he's also absurdly rich, and he has his own. And it's just like
the big thing with Batman is it doesn't matter if he has kids or if he doesn't have kids. The mission is what comes first.
Yes.
Like that's the whole thing. It's like Batman has Damian is nothing new. Batman has been the caretaker for 3 wards before Damian. So this isn't anything new. At the end of the day, it's going to come to a point where there is a choice between being a father and being the Caped Crusader, and every time his choice is the same, and that is the mission comes first.
Yes,
and that's like that's the whole thing. Is when it comes down to Superman has a very different outlook on those things, because he's always wanted a family. Despite the big thing that has always been appealing about Superman to me, or at least since I've gotten into him, is that it's not a story about power and hitting things hard. It is the fact that despite having all the power in the world, Superman is still Clark Kent, and he is Clark Kent's the people he cares about, and Kal-El is just as much of an alter ego as Superman is to Clark. It's a disguise, because it doesn't matter if he can shoot lasers out of his eyes or fly across the universe in a minute. He still considers himself Clark Kent, from Smallville, Kansas, and father's son, and farmer's son, and that's the whole appeal of Superman. And it's one of those things where it's a very difficult thing to write. There are a lot of people that get in their heads about how to write Superman, and it's why he has this very mixed history, where you have, when somebody handles him right, it'll be one of the best stories that comes out. Wow, like Gleason Tomasi, they had a thing going where they recognized that, and they pushed that, and it was a great book that everyone loved. Then you also have stories where people just make him a plot device that hits things really hard.
Well, actually, so, I mean, if you look at the early Justice League, the really early original Justice League, sometimes Gardner Fox would have to come up with very creative ways to take Superman out. Because it's like, how do I do this, right? Because he's not...
Because he is a character without any physical limitations, really.
Yeah, no, He's basically Brad Meltzer said it's best in one of his novels. He's basically a kid's wish that someone would protect everybody from all harm, and that's actually not that far from the truth. And that's
what he was intended. He was created by two Jewish immigrants from Ohio that got picked on their entire lives and created the character that they wished was there to have their back.
Yeah, and honestly, so the best my favorite modern stuff is with Superman, stuff like All-Star Superman. The Elseworlds takes on Superman are, I think, always amazing because they're not.
Some of them I like, others I did not like Superman Red Sun at all. I liked the movie actually. That surprised the bejesus out of me.
I was okay. I was okay with it because it was different. Like it was like okay, it was.
My big thing that so the concept isn't bad. My issue is that Mark Millar tried to continue writing Superman as if he was still Superman. But you cannot have Superman maintain the ethics that he does in this universe, where in the comic he knows that Stalin is putting people in gulags. He does nothing about it. These things are actively contradictory, which is why I really liked the movie, where they effectively have it be that Superman is trying to prevent this prophecy that Stalin has that in order to be in this position, he has to make those kinds of calls. And I think the line that he says in the film is, there is no difference between the security of the state and the security of his person, because he is the state, is what Stalin says to Superman in the movie before Superman kills him. I thought it was a lot better that the whole point of the film is that Superman has been kept in the dark and is a propaganda tool, and so then he becomes the Soviet premier and is trying to showcase that he can create this Marxist utopia without becoming Stalin, but in doing in the path that he does choose, he becomes a different kind of monster. And I think I thought that was really good. Whereas the comic book was just boggled down by a whole bunch of stupid crap that was just Mark Millar trying to juggle this concept with things with Easter eggs that people would want to see. Like, oh, well, there's got to be romantic tension between Lois and Superman. That's got to be a thing. We have to have Bizarro in it. But I don't know. I won't go too much.
No. We could do me and you could do a very interesting episode someday of breaking down Mark Millar, because he's an interesting figure in comics in the sense that he's probably got more movie deals than just about any other comic book creator. But it's interesting. It's interesting because I've talked to some people in the film industry about his stuff in particular, why they like it so much, and it's an interesting reason. Like, it's a really interesting reason, because they don't necessarily think that the story presented in the comics is the best story ever. But what they see is there are elements of it they really like, because he does have a lot of good ideas. I will give him this.
You know what? He is to comics what George Lucas is to films.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic idea guy. His execution, 9 times out of 10, is subpar.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are very few Mark Millar written books that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I do like the first 2 volumes of Ultimates. And in fact, it's really funny because I remember when Zack Snyder did his whole "You're living in a dream world" speech. I was like, you know what? It's really funny because if Zack Snyder and Mark Millar teamed up to make a movie based off of the first volume of Ultimates, we'd probably get one of the best comic book movies ever made.
That would be an interesting. That would be interesting to see how those 2 visions would play out together. Snyder, the first Snyder film I ever saw was Sucker Punch, which I thought was.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was able to buy the concept, even though I do think he skimped out on so much.
It was a very poorly written and poorly based film.
Yeah. No, it really was. It really was. But
it's one of those things, man. And, like, Snyder is fantastic with his visual storytelling.
Oh yeah, no,
anyone
amazing.
that tries to tell you that he doesn't know how to shoot a scene or anything is completely full of it. It's really funny because, like, you know, I had this very weird journey with Zack Snyder where, like, you know, the first movie that I remember seeing of his, I mean, outside of, like, so obviously, you know, 300, Watchmen, but, like, then I saw Man of Steel, and Man of Steel was the first time that I ever, because growing up I was a Marvel kid, and so I never really appreciated Superman, and so Man of Steel was the first time that I ever felt, like, compelled, but I've gotten to go and look at Superman, but ever since I've gone and I've read all these different books, and it's interesting because the more that I read about Superman and then go back and watch Man of Steel, the less I like Man of Steel.
Well, no, because it's one of those. I think it's an interesting thing because when you take a story and you bring it into a different medium, sometimes I definitely understand because I've been on film crews. You can't completely take a vision from one medium to another. You can't do that.
No, and that's completely understand, and I get where you're going with that because you're going to take artistic licenses and everything like that. There's going to be things like that happen. However, the core of a Superman story.
Oh yeah, no, like
it's completely and utterly missed in Man of Steel, and it's even worse in Batman versus. The fact that Superman has a line in Batman versus Superman that is "No one stays good in this world anymore" is all that needs to be said.
Yeah,
like I could go into the fact that Superman kills an African warlord within the first 30 minutes of Man of Steel, but I don't have to.
That movie is terrible. Like that one to me was like,
it's very frustrating because there are some really good things in Batman versus Superman.
Well, actually, I think that's the part that really gets me with like any creative work. When you can see that it's really just one, it's you know what the honest truth is, it's a small decision that changes everything, right? So it was probably something really simple, and then once they went in that direction, gone. And when you see that, you're like, oh, you cheesed out, you cheated yourself.
Honestly, they needed that for that film. They needed to cut out the whole Dawn of Justice angle.
Yeah.
It should have just been Batman and Superman. Lex Luthor should have been an almost tertiary character that was trying to play Bruce Wayne, not Batman. This whole thing that Lex Luthor in Batman vs. Superman has off-screen figured out the identities of both Batman and Superman is complete horseshit. This is a visual medium.
Yes.
Like, I get that 2 years has gone by since the Black Zero event, but there's no way in hell that you can justify your character not figuring out the identity.
You'd have to show Luthor making the connection for that to even begin to work.
And then you look at that.
No.
Lex Luthor's entire plot in that thing is complete crap.
Oh well, yes. No, it's
And the whole freaking subcommittee against Superman is a redundancy. Like you have the whole point of Batman vs. Superman is effectively to put Superman on trial for the destruction of Man of Steel. Okay, so that requires two things: you either A, get rid of Batman, or you either B, get rid of the subcommittee hearing. You can't have both because they both stand for the exact same thing. Batman is supposed to be your antagonizing force that is the personification of the people that don't trust Superman because of this gross display of power that did more harm than good.
Yeah.
So like that's the whole point of his character is to embody the doubt in Superman's intentions. And to be this person that wants to bring Superman down, and then you have on the opposite end, you would have Superman noticing someone that was once heroic that has fallen into the dark and trying to help lift them out from that darkness, and that would create a dynamic closer to what they have in the books, while still allowing for
a fight.
Artistic license.
Yeah.
But the problem is Zack Snyder doesn't give a shit about that. He's effectively Michael Bay. He just wants big fucking explosions and grandiose bullshit. And that, that's. I am intrigued to see the Snyder Cut. There's a lot of stuff that was in that trailer that has me like turning my head. But at the end of the day, I have no doubt that it is just going to be 4.5 hours of the same shit we got in Batman versus Superman. From a guy that completely misses the point of these characters.
Are you? Wait, you're gonna put 4.5 hours into this? Why? I was like, why? Because
I'm gonna do it. I tell you what, to showcase just the kind of person I was. I did something last week that I won't say I regret doing, but it certainly sucked putting myself through it. I went and watched Josh Trank's Fan Stick because it was on Disney Plus, and I had never seen it before. And I was curious because I remember when the first trailer of it came out, and I was like, man, that actually looks really good. And James Gunn had gotten to read Trank's screenplay before Fox had gotten a hold of it, and said that it was one of his favorite screenplays he'd ever read. And then, so I was curious. I was like, man, there has to be a good movie in there somewhere. And there were some positive elements, but there was no good movie that I could. It wasn't like Amazing Spider-Man 2, where I could watch it and be like, if Mark Webb was actually allowed to do his job, there's a good movie in here that exists outside of the super forced parent subplot and the Sinister Six setup that Sony and Avia Rad were trying to shove down that man's throat. It was just a horrible film. Fan Stick was utter garbage. I don't think I have been more disappointed with a movie than I did when I finished Fan Stick. There was no payoff here at all.
Actually, I'll tell you the movie that disappointed me the most. So bad that I just was like, because the cast was amazing. It's like good cast, actually decent cast. Not saying amazing, but decent cast. Blood Rain. I tried watching that. Yikes.
Oh man.
Yikes. The cast is good. I didn't know, and I noticed they were told to do it that way. And you looked at that and you're like, why? Right?
It all goes down to, I feel a lot of these guys in Hollywood that get a chance to do these movies don't see these properties for what they could be. They see it as, well, this is a way for me to showcase that I can make a film and then I can go off and do my next thing and actually do something I want to do.
Well, I think it's a twofold problem. That's part of it. I think the other part of it too is, I had a buddy of mine. He lives in Ireland now. He was working on directing his own films. He goes, one of the biggest problems, you don't see it you see it a lot in the mainstream, not so much in the independent scene. The language of cinema is not used very much in a lot of modern movies. They don't know how to do it, and it's amazing how much storytelling you can accomplish with very little, right? Right. I'm trying something, and I know it's probably going to be terrible the first little while I do this, so I'm doing a how to draw comic on Instagram. I'm going to be starting in about a week, right? My master plan is to get me, because honestly, drawing terrifies me. This is kind of why I'm doing this, because I don't draw well, right? And I know I don't. So this is going to be teaching myself some basic drawing stuff. But I'll tell you, the first line in the first 20 pages. Or not 20, first however many pages I can get away with reasonably, is basically going to be a back and forth between my creative voice and myself, right? And then gradually I draw out that voice and I make a character out of it for the first issue. The very first 2 lines are, "You're afraid." That's literally the first, and they're big, bold letters, "You're afraid." And it's me arguing with this character about why I'm so scared, because it's out of my comfort zone. It's out of, I've never done this, this sucks. So you'll get better eventually, and eventually he'll talk me to drawing a stick, to an angle, to eventually. But the thing is, I'm going to try to accomplish with my words at the very beginning, to try to draw people into the point where I finally do draw the story. And I think I can create a payoff. Even if the end result isn't necessarily the greatest thing ever. It doesn't have to be. It's about the journey to that moment.
Yeah.
Film's the same way, right? It's all about the journey to whatever moment you're trying to get to. And a lot of directors don't know how to do that. So that's just
and that's fair. To me, that plays into it, and I think that the business side of things has corrupted it a lot too. Because I mean, not to keep punching the Snyder van, but like you look at Batman versus Superman and Man of Steel, and they're written by David S. Goyer, and David S. Goyer was asked during the production of Dark Knight Rises, because he wrote The Dark Knight and he wrote Dark Knight Rises. He wrote both of those with Christopher Nolan. And they asked him if he would ever be interested in doing something like what they did with Batman with Superman, and he said no, not at all. I don't find Superman to be a compelling character. Why the fuck? Pardon my French.
Go ahead.
But why would you pick the person with absolutely no interest in writing a Superman movie to write a Superman? And the answer is, oh well, he returned our investment. Like Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises are two of our highest grossing films right now. So that's why.
Yeah.
Just like you could have gotten somebody who would also return that investment, but actually cares.
It would have been really interesting if they actually gotten someone like Mark Waid to do it, because Mark Waid would have done it.
Mark Waid is one of those people. Like we were talking about people that have gotten to a point where you can hardly recognize their writing. Mark Waid has written some of my favorite stories. Like, Kingdom Come is
brilliant
as a classic. But you look at his stuff now, and it's such a mixed bag of cats.
Yes.
If you know who I'd want to write a Superman, a Superman script, like for either Peter Tomasi would be great, and in fact, Peter Tomasi wrote the screenplay for the animated Death of Superman movie, which is why
it's really good. It's really good.
The best one of that terrible New 52 era of DC animation. But the other person I would pick would honestly be Paul Dini.
Paul Dini's an interesting choice. He has the.
He did those books. Like, people forget about this, but Paul Dini did those books with Alex Ross.
Oh yeah.
Where he did Shazam, Power of Hope. He did Superman, World Peace, Wonder Woman.
He's an interesting choice. Okay, I'll tell you who I would pick. Actually, now that I think about it, this is who I'd pick. I'd go with someone like G. Willow Wilson. I would love to see her get a crack at it. I think she would bring something really. She has this great. I love I love the what the hell, man.
What's she done? The name is familiar, but it's
okay. She did. She's most famous for her Miss Marvel, but she's also done Wonder Woman. And Invisible Kingdom is the book that I really think the reason why I think she could do it. It's just big. Superman. For Superman, I think I love Paul Dini because Paul Dini would get Clark Kent perfectly. Like he would do a really good Clark Kent. He would do a very good Superman. I think though, I would take a chance. Like G. Willow Wilson would be my first choice. My second choice, can't use those two anymore. No, I think G. Willow Wilson. Dini's a good choice.
Maybe you know who would be my second choice if we're going off of comic book writers?
Yeah.
Because I chose Paul Dini because he's written comics, but he was also one of the core writers of those animated shows.
Yeah. in my perfect world, it'd be Dwayne McDuffie or Christopher Priest. In my perfect world. But I mean, but I don't know. Dwayne's not possible, and I don't know if Christopher Priest would be interested in trying something like that. So,
so if I were to do a Superman movie, I'm not the biggest fan of this guy. I think that he's probably one of the most inconsistent writers I've ever read. But he wrote a Superman book that is one of the most pure Superman stories I've read in a long time. And was a refreshing break from the garbage I had to deal with Bendis. That's Tom King. Tom King wrote Up in the Sky. And Up in the Sky would lend itself brilliantly to a film.
I thought about him. I
think that Grant Morrison is obvious, but like you'd want Grant Morrison if you were doing a live action adaptation.
Oh well, you want but that's what you want Morrison. I think. See, Tom King, I want to do Metalman. That's the book I'd want him to do because I think that would be so up his alley. I still think Vision. I really dug is Mr. Miracle. His Mr. Miracle runs.
I liked the first few issues of Mr. Miracle. I wasn't too jazzed by the end of it. Like my big thing with Tom King is I think that Tom King thinks that he is a smarter writer than he actually is. He tries to deconstruct every character that he writes. And at the end of the day, all of his character deconstructions have very little to say, and they're all the same deconstruction. At the end of the day, all of these characters end up being the same. And then if you give King a large cast of characters to write, it becomes garbage. You look at things like, his story that he did for the Detective Comics 1000 special has a solid premise, but if you took away those panels and you had all the Bat family talking with one another, it would have effectively be 7 Shades of Dick Grayson and then Damian Wayne.
Yeah.
Nobody. There was no diversity in dialogue. There was no diversity in thought, and this is a constant thing with Tom King. And you look at Heroes in Crisis. Every single person, you have this really cool idea where you have a relief center for these heroes to kind of bear their heart and soul and their trauma from years of crime fighting. But at the end of the day, everything that every single person says is one shade is a shade of the same gray. Every single one of none of them have anything none of these heroes have anything interesting to say in these things that really set themselves apart from anyone else because it's all of them moaning and whining about the same shit. And the fact of the matter is that you're going to have some people that go into this and they are going to bear their heart and souls out. They are going to do that. But you're going to have other people who don't take it seriously. You're going to have other people that that handle it this way.
Yep.
And the fact of the matter is that Tom King just portrayed everyone as just utterly sad, and not even just utterly sad. The same kind of sadness across the board. He has very good concepts, but his execution is mixed at best. The only book of Tom King's where I genuinely was pumping my fist in the air every single time I read an issue was Up in the Sky, because it was simple. It didn't require a lot. It was, there is a girl that has been kidnapped. She's been taken across the universe. Superman is going after her to bring her home. And that's what every issue was, is that he was put up against a new challenge that would potentially prevent him from getting to that little girl, but he's freaking Superman. And so it didn't matter. It didn't matter how impossible that task may have been. That girl's getting home.
Let me help you tell your story the way you want it told. If you're in the genres of science fiction, fantasy, thriller, historical, or young adult, I have services that can definitely help you. I can produce, narrate, and master said audiobook so it's ready for Amazon and any other software you need. For more information, see my website at jpantelleresco.wordpress.com/audiobook services. You worked hard to create that story, and I'll work just as hard to make sure it's told in the right way. And that's part one of my conversation with Michael Oden. We'll continue our Tom King, and we get into Batman and some really cool other comic stuff. We talk about his book a little bit, Greek mythology, more stuff coming in part two, but this is part one. So I want to thank Michael for being on the show, and like I said, we'll talk about all his books at the end of the next episode. But thank you for listening to this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Joshua Pantelleresco. You can find some cool live interviews there that have just been released, and also like archives of this podcast as well. Number one. Number two, you can subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, and Audible. My books, Model Zero and The Cloud Diver, are available on Amazon.com right now. Beyond all that, guys, stay inspired. Keep doing your thing, especially in this time. And I'll talk to you guys in 446. Take care, all.
Josh.